Welcome to this week's News Cablecast. I'm your host and editor, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. This week we're going to be continuing our report on the Rush Line and the field trip that the Policy Advisory Committee took to Richmond, Virginia. Now, for those of you thinking, gosh, wasn't the Rush Line given a new name? Yes, indeed it was. It was given the name, it's going to be the Purple Line. But for most people out there, they think of it as the Rush Line because the Rush Line for years and years and years has been talked about and is going to decimate the Bruce Vento Trail. And everybody knows where the Bruce Vento Trail is. Now, to help me with this week's news report is my co-anchor, Mr. Kevin Berglund. Thank you, Mr. Berglund, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Mr. Berglund, you had an opportunity of going out to Richmond, Virginia to investigate the BRT that they have out there, the Pulse. And last week we showed some of your film footage of the route of the BRT. Today we're going to also show some other additional footage, and you also were tuning in to the recent Ramsey County Board meeting where a couple of the Ramsey County commissioners were giving a review and update of the field trip they took to Richmond, Virginia. Did you learn any new information from their little report that they gave?
Well, both these Ramsey County board members are long time, many years Ramsey County commissioners. So you would think when they go out and take a junket or a field trip out to Richmond, Virginia, they would have something substantial, something significant. They would know where to look, what to research for, how to put it together, and how to articulate what they've seen. And of course, if you watch the October 8th Ramsey County Board, you see that Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt and Commissioner Rafael Ortega have really nothing new to add over what had been the talking points prior to anybody going out to Richmond, Virginia. Shock and awe.
So, yes, I'm glad you brought that up. They're just basically reiterating the talking points that were established before they ever went out to Richmond, Virginia. And we pulled out that clip from our archives from the July meeting of the Policy Advisory Committee, where the policy committee members are being told what to expect of the trip and this the BRT in Richmond, Virginia. So let's take a look at that.
On to item 9 and the upcoming activities.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the opportunities we wanted to bring to this group's attention is an invitation for the members of our advisory committee for community policy and technical for
Thanks for coming.
Peer region system trip to Richmond, Virginia. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Cassie, who's going to walk through the details of this trip. From past experience on other projects, these are often great opportunities to learn from what others have done well and learn from where others maybe would have done something differently, an opportunity to meet with leadership and take that information back to help to make a stronger Rush Line project that reflects the needs of.
An opportunity to learn. How can we do it better? What would they advise that we consider? Okay, so I would expect as a resident then listening to the Ramsey County Board members who went on this trip that their summary would be something more than, oh yeah, it's pretty much all the same as what we've got here. But instead they would say, one important thing I learned was we should have stainless steel for our bus platforms because we've got winter and the salt corrodes the platforms if you don't use stainless steel, for instance. That was actually a tidbit that we learned from our interview with the project manager out in Richmond, Virginia, when we went out there and we did our investigation. We came back with knowledge. Listening to these county commissioners, you don't know that they came back with anything other than a suntan.
Right, because this is the South, Richmond, Virginia, and it was warm out there. You would think that even if they didn't have the ability or the time to actually get anything out and take a closer analytical look at their county board meeting, however, they do have all day, so their real time is of no issue. And of course, on the Ramsey County Board, all 7 of them are buds, associates, many of them hanging around each other on that county board, majority of hanging around for many, many years. The most obvious thing is, okay, how much real estate did they have to acquire? How did they acquire that real estate? What did they have to knock down? Did they have to go through, for example, go through the woods? Did they have to decimate tens of thousands of trees
And
to
that's
build their roadway for a bus?
And here's a good example that you are bringing out, is that here with the Rush Line, they have to do this big, huge environmental impact assessment. Not that it's going to change anything, that's only going to give them what mitigation they have to do in order to do what they want to do. But they still have to do this big assessment. In the Richmond, Virginia BRT situation, did they have to do an environmental assessment, an environmental impact assessment? Well, when you see the route, I think you might agree with me that more than likely they didn't have to do any environmental impact assessment in Richmond, Virginia. But let's take a look at our next clip, where it's Commissioner Ortega giving his summary of his experience on the field trip.
Commissioner Ortega, outside board and committee reports.
Well, we spent most of the week, Victoria went along to Richmond, Virginia. We took her to a Rush Line. I'll let her elaborate more, but we had a good turnout. I think about 35 people came along with us, included most of the folks along the corridor, the cities, 2 mayors, the mayor of Maplewood and the mayor of White Bear Lake came along. It was a packed day, I would say. We started at 8 o'clock sharp, and I don't think we finished till 5 at least.
Always later than that.
Yeah, so it was very good, and we've learned a lot, and it's very much like our corridor.
Yep.
The size of the city, the geography, except for the weather, of course, but it was a good trip.
Good, good.
So Commissioner Ortega says they spent the week in Richmond, Virginia. Then he proceeds to say that they spent a whole day talking with the people from the Richmond, Virginia BRT. And my goodness, it started at 8 and went till 5. And well, that the area is much the same, the geography's the same, everything's the same. Wow. We know that here in Minnesota, the Rush Line, the Purple Line, only has a small portion of it in St. Paul. That is the portion that is the southmost portion of the route. The majority of all of the route then is in Maplewood and extending through White Bear Lake. If you've been on the Bruce Vento Trail, I want you in your mind's eye to picture the last time you were on the Bruce Vento Trail. You will see that there is a bituminous trail. Mr. Berglund, can you see this in your mind's eye?
Absolutely.
There's a bituminous trail. There's grassy shoulders on either side of it. There is a mature tree canopy over it. There are people who are on their bicycles going down the Bruce Vento Trail. There's people walking. There's a person down on the end there with their dog walking this way. There's kids on bicycles. That's what the Bruce Vento Trail looks like. And that's what the great portion of that area looks like. Now, let's take a look at what the Richmond, Virginia bus rapid transit trail looks like and the area surrounding it. Let's take a look. This is taken from the observation deck, which is the whole top of the building of City Hall, which is right next to the Richmond, Virginia BRT station. Let's take a look. So Mr. Berglund, go ahead and describe what we're looking at here.
Well, this is like Minnesota has University Avenue. Their main street there, where the University of the Commonwealth of Virginia is on, is Broad Street. And so you can see the street there. It's a street, which is a old-time street, which is a busy street.
Four lanes with a bus lanes as well.
Right, and we're up 13 floors, so you can, I believe, and so you can see where the size of the buildings are. It seems like there's a couple large buildings, but
Does this look like Maplewood at all?
Wow. That's what I think they keep thinking Maplewood looks like, but I haven't found that road yet in Maplewood.
Is this what White Bear Lake looks like?
Man, well, I guess, doesn't it look very similar? It's just that there's no lake right there. But isn't that what you see in downtown White Bear Lake?
Is this what the south end of the Rush Line looks like if you're thinking about how you meander through the Phelan Parkway and where the Mung Shopping Center is?
I can hardly tell the difference. I mean, I can hardly tell the difference between the east side of St. Paul through Sweet Hollow and this. How could you even see? How could he?
How could you miss it, right?
How you would be confused
You
between
know,
the two?
This looks like Sweet Hollow to me. It absolutely does. And that must be very similar to Maplewood and looks as if I'm just looking at downtown White Bear Lake. And so you see, this is Richmond, Virginia. And what we're looking at now is Broad Street, the very street that the Pulse goes down. Oh, and there's a bus waiting. The Pulse bus was waiting at the stop, waiting for the light to turn so it can proceed.
Is that the Rapid Bus Transit?
That is the Rapid Bus Transit.
Waiting at a stop where there's no cars in the intersection.
That's right, because you see, it doesn't have priority over the cars. The only cars that it has priority over are those that are in a turn lane that have to turn across the bus lane. That's the only lane of cars that the Rapid Bus Transit has priority over in Richmond, Virginia. So I think Commissioner Ortega has confused Richmond, Virginia and Broad Street with University Avenue in St. Paul moving into Minneapolis. I think that he is confusing Minneapolis and that light rail with what this vision is of Richmond, Virginia. Because certainly we do not see the geography of Maplewood, of White Bear Lake, or Sweet Hollow, or even the Phelan Corridor Parkway by the Hmong Village as anything like Richmond, Virginia. Now, let's return back to the Ramsey County Commissioners meeting, because that was all Commissioner Ortega had to say about the whole week long that he was in Richmond, Virginia, although he was only at one day of meeting, according to his report. So let's listen in to Vicki Reinhardt, who is the county commissioner serving the area of Maplewood and White Bear Lake. Let's see what kind of report she gets, or maybe she spent her time getting a suntan.
I'll follow up on that a little bit. When Commissioner Ortega talks about the weather, it was 98 degrees out there. It was not their usual weather, and everywhere we went, people were apologizing for the weather. It's like we're from Minnesota, it changes all the time. But it was unusually warm out there. But I think that it was really an incredible tour, very quick as far as trying to get in as much as we could. We actually, what they have is it's called the Pulse there, and it is very similar to Rush Line in that part of it is in a dedicated guideway. It is bus rapid transit, and then some of it's on the road, mostly dedicated. And again, that's very similar to Rush Line. It has been operational for about a year and a half, I think.
Okay, so we've got the weather report, and now again the same mantra that they keep saying over and over and over again, that the Richmond, Virginia BRT is so similar to the Rush Line, that it's the same kind of setup, that there's the dedicated bus lanes, that there is the concurrent with the traffic lanes, and it's all the same. Now, last week we showed a composite of our traveling along the route of the BRT Pulse in Richmond, Virginia. So let's take a look at that again. And again, I want you to think to yourself, the last time you were on the Bruce Vento Trail, whether or not this seems similar to you or not. Let's take a look. Mr. Berglund, describe what we're looking at here.
Well, you can see we're in the car and you're on Broad Street, and there's this, they call that a dedicated guideway, which is similar, I guess Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt looks at it similar to the Bruce Vento Trail. And in one of those lanes there, only buses, it says bus only bus. Now, there you can see it's just the regular roadway that has been there for years, many, many years. Maybe historically there was a trolley car there, but they just, they didn't move any buildings, they didn't move any sidewalks back, they just planted.
And they didn't cut down thousands of trees. Now here's a station, and you can see where there is the lane for the bus that is right to the station platform where people can get on. So this is all authentic film footage up and down the route. Here's the station for the other lane going the other direction. So you can see some areas there's the median with the platforms for the bus for getting on and off the bus. And then there's other places where the bus has to cross all these rows of traffic to get over to the right side of the street closer to the sidewalk. There's the bus, and then go to a platform that is next to the sidewalk. So depending upon which station you're talking about, some of them have their stations in the middle of the street. Some of them have their stations, their platforms on the side of the street next to the sidewalk.
And of course, this is the same street that has been there for, what, 50 years, 100 years? Now, what is the environmental impact going to be?
Well, I think since the Civil War.
What is going to be the environmental impact, for example, of water runoff or any environmental impact if you just put a stripe down the road? Now, of course, the Bruce Vento Trail is completely different. A lot of the Bruce Vento Trail is actually on the sides of it is actually holding culverts for water runoff for lots of different areas. To install a big concrete roadway with hundreds or thousands of tons of concrete, change the terrain, decimate the trees, there's just enormous and massive environmental differences. Is there even a difference at all between if you have a stripe down there that says cars can run in there, or if you have a stripe that says buses can run in that lane?
And can't you see where this could easily have been adapted to Highway 61? But
Well, that's
apparently the county and Maplewood are unable to cooperatively work with the transportation department in charge of Highway 61.
I think that's a pretty fair, that's a fair statement, that it does not seem like Ramsey County, Maplewood, one of their partners is the Minnesota Department of Transportation, because if it was a partner and if they could work together, and if the Minnesota Department of Transportation actually thought this rapid transit was a rational idea, an idea that would actually serve Minnesotans, I think they would be very happy to have it in somewhere on Highway 61 to take pressure. Apparently it's going to be relieving all kinds of pressure, to take pressure off the future development of roadway on Highway 61. But apparently they have dismissed it. The engineers and planners over at MnDOT, Minnesota Department of Transportation, have dismissed it as kind of a fringe and crazy idea and said, you go back.
And not a good use of funding. I mean, because all of these things have to be funded. And when we talked to the project manager in Richmond, Virginia, which he kindly gave us an hour of his time to talk about the project and how they were able to move forward with it and the types of funding they had, he described that their project was a project where they had 4 to 5 different types of transportation entities involved in the partnership. Now, they too, though, did experience some challenges and conflict between various governmental entities, and part of the reason why the Pulse does not go outside of Richmond, Virginia, is because the county that is on the north boundary of Richmond, Virginia, did not want to participate, so that's why the Pulse doesn't go beyond there, because they said, no way, Jose, we don't want it here. So that's part of the reason why the Pulse is only in Richmond, Virginia. It doesn't go to the suburbs. It doesn't go anywhere else other than just up and down Broad Street. That's all it does.
And if you take a look at a similar bus rapid transit, which they want to build in part of Maplewood on Highway 94, there's clearly a partnership.
Oh, the Gold Line.
Right. There's clearly a partnership with Minnesota Department of Transportation. Here, of course, there is no partnership. So it's not as if the Minnesota Department of Transportation, the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation, the governor of the state of Minnesota is necessarily hostile to bus rapid transit. They have to oversee logical, methodical, fiscally stable, rational ways to use their highway dollars and their transportation dollars. And from looking at this in the bigger view, looking at it from the forest, it seems clear that the reason that the Department of Transportation is not a partner in this whole scheme, which is being pushed by, you can see, Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt, Commissioner Rafael Ortega, who are on their talking points, is because the Minnesota Department of Transportation refuses to take part of this whole boondoggle. Of course, going back to Commissioner Rafael Ortega, and just as a comment, he seemed like he was exasperated or exhausted. It was like, I mean, I thought the county commissioners were busy every day of the week working and advocating for the residents. He's out there listening to some presentations in Richmond, Virginia, and he looks like, and he said it was a packed day from 8 to 5. He looks like he's part of the morning donut club that gets together to chit chat for an hour and goes home to take a nap. 8 to 5? Is that a packed day? I think he needs to see what a lot of his constituents, how much they need to work every day.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe he should tag along with us, where our packed days start at 5:30 in the morning and end at about midnight. So now that's a packed day. Well, let's continue with Vicki Reinhardt's comments with regard to her perspective of this field trip to Richmond, Virginia.
And they talked about everything from community engagement and issues very similar to the ones that we are hearing and have been, and trying to make sure we're addressing those with facts, not just conjecture. And it was interesting to hear that. Also talked about the funding of it and how you really need to engage community, which I believe that we are doing and will continue to do, because we're in that phase of, okay, now what's next? The number of people that were there, I think really spoke to the fact that we're moving forward and trying to make sure that we are getting all the information we possibly can to make the best decisions. And because there's still a lot of decisions to be made here, but just moving forward and learning from their experience. And they were very welcoming as far as any questions that we had. If they didn't have the answers on the first day, they made sure that they came in on Friday to really answer those questions plus more.
I think she indicated that they were moving forward at least 3 times in just that small clip. She also said that the number of people there was an indication of how good their program is, and it sounded like she was talking about how many people showed up for the field trip was an indication of how well the Rush Line program is moving forward. Isn't that the way it sounded? And yet, to me, I don't think that that's how you measure how well your program is doing, is by how many people decide they want to go on a paid field trip. I know that we paid for our own field trip to go out there, but we're investigative reporters. They went out there on stipends and paid by governmental entities.
Let me take a stab at it. That was shocking that 35 people want to go when we're not quite sure who paid, but people's airfare was covered, people's hotel room was covered, people's meals were covered, people's other transportation out there was covered, for example, from the airport. Wow. And that's a shock to her, that apparently indicates that everything is moving forward. And we know from her testimony and from Commissioner Raphael's Ortega's testimony that it was wonderful down there, that it was 98 degrees and sunny.
And he indicated that they had their full day from 8 till 5. Now she indicates that they had that full day, and if there were additional questions, they came back on Friday morning to answer them. Since Commissioner Ortega didn't talk about Friday morning, I'm wondering if he even went to Friday morning, since he didn't include that in his report.
Right.
At least Commissioner Reinhardt talked about Friday morning, and of course Friday morning and at noon, Friday noon, is when we got the selfie of Mr. Berglund and Daryl, who was one of the attendees to this field trip, who was the non-government, non-committee member, a representative of the people. and certainly Daryl, in his heart, is a representative of the people.
Well,
but they use his attendance as if they are reaching out to the public.
And I think this one out of 35 or whatever number it was, because they weren't absolutely, totally, definitely specific of it, and we have never seen a listing of all the people who came out there. But what we're taking from it, looking back, is that he might be the only one of the whole gang of associates that went out there, or pals, that actually, on any kind of basis, takes the bus system.
Right.
But what shocks me about this whole group of Vicki Reinhardt, this is her report. You would think that if the Ramsey County, because we know Ramsey County is jacking up taxes again, Maplewood is really going at it jacking up taxes, that if the government is going to be giving these kind of field trips and junkets, and these people are taking them, the very least requirement is that they would have to submit a written report saying, when I went out to Richmond, Virginia, this is what I learned. Because wasn't that the big mission of this, to learn something? Well, let's hear in writing so that you can share it with other committee members. You can share it with the bigger Ramsey County and suburban area.
And I would like to know, what were the questions that were asked that the staff in Richmond, Virginia didn't have the answers to, that they came back later with the answers and answered? That's what I would like to know, because that would actually mean to me that the people who went on the field trip had some in-depth questions that was beyond the cursory information they were provided, that they were actually thinking about something that was a greater detail than the gloss that was given.
And if you play back that Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt's comment, I want you to try to figure out what she was actually talking about.
Right.
What did any of that actually mean? We knew all they were they were moving forward. That's what she wanted to keep telling us. Moving forward, and they were getting away with it. I had that impression. We're still getting away with moving forward on this. But the question is, what did any of that other stuff what did it mean? It was just general throwaway a talk that seemed to be just the same old PR lines.
Cotton candy. Well, we've got one more clip of Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt. Maybe we've done her an injustice, and maybe in this last clip, she will come through for us and give us a list of what she learned and the takeaways that she actually came back with that can be communicated to the public. Let's take a look.
It's Mayor Stoney. I can't remember his first name. He met with us and actually had lunch with us and really, again, talked about the on the ground, what do you do when you've got a project this size and how does it go forward? And how do you keep people engaged? So it was incredibly valuable, from the Met Council to MnDOT to Ramsey County, the cities, businesses. I mean, we had a really good mix of people.
Community folks.
Yes, so many community folks. And just really, again, trying to, when we're looking at any decision like this, to be able to learn from other people's experiences is so valuable that you really can't put a price tag on it. But the timing was right for us, the timing was right for them, and I'm just grateful that we were able to really see it in action. And so, the takeaways are important.
Takeaways are important. And there were so many community folks.
So many.
So many community folks. She's been watching too many speeches of the president because he talks exactly the same way. There were so many community folks, so many good folks out there, so many. And yet that tells us nothing about what are you talking about. Are they saying that Steve Love, the Public Works Director of Maplewood, him being on that trip was part of the so many community folks? Or that appointed Mayor Marley Abrams being on the trip was one of those so many community folks? How many community folks? And exactly how many of them actually had titles of some kind? We know that Daryl doesn't have a title. We know that Daryl is a community folk. And we're glad that he was on that trip because at least we, the people, might have had one person that was on there that isn't part of their financial system. But here's something else she said. She talked about how impressed she was that the mayor of Richmond, Virginia, came and had lunch with them. Wow, but then she couldn't remember his first name.
And I wasn't actually sure when he had lunch with him, did he give a presentation or did he just sit at the same table with Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt? Was he talking to her one-on-one, or was he giving a presentation of the strategies they use? It was, I'm assuming he must have gave a presentation over lunch, but I don't know. That certainly wasn't clear.
But what I can tell you is this, is that Mayor LeVar Stoney is a full-time mayor. His salary is about $125,000 a year. So part of his job is to meet with organizations like this that come to his city. So this is not out of the ordinary. It wasn't done because she was extra special. It was done because this is part of the job he does. And we found his office to be very personable, very accommodating, and very helpful. Because when we were told that they were having their meetings at City Hall, of course we were told that because they wanted to put us off the scent. But we went to City Hall and talked to the city clerk, and she didn't have it on her calendar, so she sent us to the office of the mayor. And the mayor's office, they said, we don't have that. They're having their meetings here. They're at the Hilton. And they were the ones who were very helpful to us in understanding where this group of 35 people, how could you miss a group of 35 people, where they were meeting and where they were having their sessions on the BRT. And what's so secret about the BRT? After all, it's public transportation. Their documents for the Richmond, Virginia BRT are all on their website. You can ride it, it's operational. It's not a big secret. And yet, the leadership of this group of 35 people felt that they certainly could not have the media know where they were at, what they were doing, what they were saying, or if they were just simply sleeping in the back row during the presentations waiting for nap time. Oh my gosh, are we at 5 o'clock yet?
And of course, this Ramsey County group, which had many community members. Now, we don't know how many of them actually, except for one, actually ever really takes the bus on any kind of basis. I would have thought that would have been a point to bring out there if you're going to bring out that. And we didn't heard anything if there was any equity, like there were any minorities or students or any regular, we were talking about regular bus riders, but any Asian, Latinos, African Americans. We haven't heard.
Elderly?
we haven't heard if there was even one. And I don't know if, in terms of elderly, if you watch Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt kind of wobble around, you get the feeling that she could have actually expanded what it's like to be elderly and to use this bus system on how if she could carry a bag of groceries and a
Or
bottle
two.
of milk.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's something she could have.
That's right. With this system, with this BRT system and the platforms, would she herself use it to go grocery shopping and then haul home a couple of bags of groceries on the BRT? That's an
Whether
excellent
she was
question.
doing it in her hands or in some sort of a shopping cart,
Right.
how successful she would have been. And you would have thought that at least one person on that trip would be looking at that issue, because that kind of issue is a real practical issue.
Well, yes, because we are told that it is to serve the community, that it is to be an equalizer in equity. I mean, that's what we're told, that it's to bring equity to the communities for those who have less so they have access. That's what we're told. Now, if that's the case, then the people who are on this field trip should have put themselves in those shoes and said, okay, if I have 2 small children with me and I have to go grocery shopping, can I go grocery shopping and haul along 2 small kids and then drop one off at the daycare and the other one at school while I'm on my way to work with my handful of groceries?
Right.
Okay, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, and by the way, after work, she has to go to her doctor's appointment before she picks up the one child at school and the other one at daycare. And hopefully the milk hasn't soured in her grocery bag by that time. Okay, so let's continue with a clip from our archives, which is from that Policy Advisory Committee back in July, when they were talking about the makeup of the people who are going to go on this field trip. So this now is Sue Vento, who's the representative for the Maplewood area. She's the representative on the Metropolitan Council. Let's hear what she thought it meant to have community folks attend this field trip.
Is serving as our Ramsey County point person, organizing the trip and all logistics. So
Yes, thank you.
you send questions to her.
Good job, Cassie.
Madam Chair, I'm not able to attend, but I have a request as far as the plan. I hope that the stakeholders include riders. I think it would be really good to get their viewpoint on it. And a question of all of the stakeholders, what would you do differently now that you've had this experience? So that, you know, what have you learned that you want to pass on to us? Absolutely. I think that would be really beneficial.
There. Okay, Sue Vento, she has this understanding that some of the stakeholders should be people from the community, those community folks, ones who specifically ride the bus. But did she do a follow-up to confirm that those community stakeholders were involved?
And what I see at that policy committee is I see a lot of white people. Look through the camera. Did you see anybody who wasn't white? Well, I know there was one Asian lady there, and she's running for the city council. So would you call somebody who's running for the city council on all kinds of city commissions already and completely plugged in the system, Miss Terry Tao, would you consider her a community member? I don't think she's a bus rider. But my question is, of that 35 people who went out there, how many of them are not white people? We know that one is not a white person. The worn out, exasperated, long time, what is that, 20 years, 25 years, County Commissioner Rafael Ortega. But what kind of equity is it if you're sending all these, I got a lot of time on my hands, I'm driving an Escalade Vicki Reinhardt around town. What kind of equity are you talking about if these are the people who are going to be evaluating the system? And it's like, again, it's that same old system. You got a lot of wealthy, white, older people making decisions for a lot of renters, minorities, Asians, Black, Latinos,
And people who
without
are-
them being involved.
Right, with people who have to feed their kids.
Right.
And make sure that they can get to work on time and pay their bills, because that's what's at the heart of their day-to-day life.
And the one thing that Commissioner Vicki Reinhardt made a big splash about is how welcoming they were down in Richmond, Virginia. Now, that she by implication says that they're welcoming in St. Paul, Ramsey County, Minnesota, but it of course is just the opposite. We found the mayor's office, the city hall, the planners down in Richmond, Virginia to be extremely welcoming. And it's exactly, diametrically, totally different from the experience you're going to get up in Ramsey County, where they apparently had a very packed day from 8 to 5, but yet, and they're transparent up here, but there has been no agenda, to the best of my knowledge, published of what their packed, overwhelming, exhausted day that they incurred, or any day incurred. Welcoming in Richmond, Virginia, absolutely. In fact, the one gentleman who was the community member said that was his experience down there is there's a lot of Southern charm, and we got to find some way to bring that back here. Now, I think he was being diplomatic because it was just so obvious that they were so helpful.
Well, there is this big issue about the makeup of the group that got to go on this junket. Originally, we were led to believe that it was only those individuals by invitation who were on the Policy Advisory Committee for the Rush Line. That's it. And that nobody else was going and nobody else was invited, other than, according to Sue Vento, that there was going to be certainly at least one community member that
rider.
would go, a bus rider. We identified that individual, that's Daryl, because Daryl identified himself to us as that person. Indeed, he went. And the reason we got that idea was because of what Andy in Ramsey County informed us of when he declined our request to be members of the community as bus riders to attend on the junket.
Because our interest was to go as reporters and actually film these sessions so we could bring it back to show you. So there would be some accountability and some transparency. Our idea was to find out what the great benefits of that they were being presented, what the disadvantages, the opportunities, the strengths, the weaknesses, and the threat, and show you long pieces of extended video footage.
And certainly, if the BRT in Richmond, Virginia is a successful BRT, wouldn't that be an excellent story to communicate to our viewers in Minnesota? Now, of course, we went out there, we did our own investigation, and I think coming back, we would concur that the BRT there in Richmond, Virginia, is down a main drag where it should be. That's where the commerce is. That's where the commercial properties are.
That's where the students.
The huge university is, and all the riders that could use the BRT are. So
To get from
yes.
one part of the campus to the other part of the campus.
And
Similar to what the BRT is over at the Twin City campus at the University of Minnesota, where there's approximately 52,000 students.
Or to go further up the route a little ways and maybe get to their housing, or to, there were a couple of, shopping areas at the end of it. Perhaps they might go there. So you could see where it actually is a good transportation system. We travel a lot, and so we do use public transportation a lot in many different communities. So we know the difference between a good public transportation system and one that just doesn't make it. So it's not that we don't ride buses, we do. We ride buses, we ride light rail, we ride subways, we ride BRTs, airplanes, cars, boats, scooters. So, but let's take a look. We're going to listen in on the voicemail that we received from Andy after we submitted our request to participate in this junket.
And Andy, of course, is the one running the Policy Advisory Committee, and in many aspects, he's considered the head, the one in charge of putting together for Ramsey County this Purple Line, the bus rapid transit.
Let's take a look.
This is Andy Gitzloff with Ramsey County. Co-worker forwarded your message about inquiring about the Rush Line Richmond new trip in October. I just wanted to follow up and clarify that that invite went out to only Community Policy and Technical Advisory Committee members for that invite that is based on the trip. And this trip isn't a public meeting either. If there's any additional questions that you have, feel free to reach out to me directly at 651-66-2777. Thank you.
Well, at least he gave his phone number. I guess that's somewhat transparent. Many times they won't even give you a direct line.
It's his answering machine number.
Oh, by mistake.
But he did use that word only.
He did say only, and there was 35 of those only people. So, or 34 minus Daryl. Okay, so let us then, now next we're going to look at the film footage from the Maplewood City Council, because you see, appointed Mayor Marley Abrams went on this junket. And so she was so excited that she went on this junket that when she started the Maplewood City Council meeting, she had to go right on into her big report before she even did the Pledge of Allegiance. That's how excited she was to get out of town on somebody else's dime. Well, let's take a look.
If you remember, you approved my attendance and also Public Works Director Steve Love's attendance in Richmond, Virginia, to go to a transportation conference. Richmond, Virginia has a BRT line, a bus rapid transit line, that they call the Pulse. We are looking at Maplewood in the next few years. First with our Gold Line, and Councilmember Smith is a representative on the Gold Line, and then the Rush Line going through the north side of Maplewood, from actually connecting St. Paul up to White Bear. And I have to say that it was an extraordinary opportunity to go and see a BRT line and to see how they operate, and talk to the city representatives, talk with the mayor. We actually had lunch with the mayor of Richmond and talked with some of the issues that they had. But I have to say that it was, there's nothing like actually seeing it and being there.
I agree. There's nothing like seeing it and being there in person. Absolutely. And we were. And now you, the viewers, you get to be there too. Now, did you notice, Mr. Berglund, how she has now expanded this junket where they're just going to have a few people go out, talk to the people who are the project managers of the BRT, ride it a couple times. Now it's bloomed and grown and expanded into a transportation conference. Oh my goodness. Now that's a good way to make it sound like it's highly important. It was a transportation conference. And of course, we know from our film footage and our clips we've shown from the committees where it was announced that they're going to go on this little junket Nobody said anything about a transportation conference, but you see, appointed Mayor Marley Abrams is a skilled attorney. And of course, attorneys know how to use the words to help sell whatever concept it is that they are trying to put forth. Now, of course, I can say that because I am an attorney, and a good attorney knows how to use their words. Marley is just trying to make this bigger than it is, a transportation conference. And it was, as Victoria Reinhardt and Rafael Ortega have said, an excellent opportunity. They've all saying it's an excellent opportunity.
My response is, what a racket.
And she was excited that they got to have lunch with the mayor again. Oh my goodness, it must have been some humdinger of a lunch. And I'll tell you, it's amazing what things, she must not get out of town much and travel much, because it sounded like she really has never been on a BRT in her life, or even a bus for that matter.
Well, what I take away from it is it sounds like you said, she hasn't taken advantage as many junkets as Raphael, or take Commissioner Raphael, because it seemed like exasperated by the whole thing.
Oh yeah, that transportation conference was just a whole day from 8 to 5. Oh my God, and it was tiring at that. Well, we have time for one more clip.
Is 7 miles long, whereas our BRT line, I know the Rush line is going to be 14 miles. Councilmember Smith, how long is the Gold line? Do you know?
It's about
11 miles connecting St. Paul out to Woodbury, going through Maplewood. And so our lines are considerably longer, but to actually see one in operation, I was particularly interested in the level entrance into the buses so that there's no step up, which is great in terms of people who might have challenges with steps, that it's level boarding, and so it's really convenient and very fast. The interesting facts that I recalled about the experience was that it took 2 years to build, and the BRT line in Richmond has only been operating for a little over a year.
She was taken by the fact that they have raised platforms. Like, this is an invention she has never encountered in her life. You know, all she's got to do, quite frankly, is just drive down Larpenteur from Maplewood into Roseville, get to Snelling, and get on one of the BRT elevated platforms in Roseville and just ride the BRT to her heart's delight right there in Roseville, only a few miles away.
Maybe she could get out of the one right in front of Harmar Mall.
She could. She could.
Free parking.
I mean, if this is such an exciting adventure for her, I know how she can relive it again. Just go to Roseville, get on the BRT, and ride it up and down Snelling to your heart's delight. To your heart's delight.
Oh, they probably haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, have they?
Oh, no, that'll be next year. They'll decide, let's take a field trip to Roseville. No, they won't do that because they won't be able to stay at the Hilton in Roseville. Well, Mr. Berglund, we've come to the end of our newscast this week. But we have more film footage, and they've got more meetings coming up where they're going to be talking about the findings of their junket. So we're going to be there.
Well, they say they're going to be talking about them.
You're saying they may not talk about them? Oh, yes, they're just going to talk about it as a glorious, wonderful, excellent opportunity that they had, and just keep it all to themselves. Well, thank you, Mr. Berglund, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Viewers, thank you for tuning in. Please tune in again next week as we continue this investigative report into the Rush Line boondoggle of the century.